Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. And again, welcome to our Oceania Pacifica Organic Food System Dialogue. We do thank you for your patience. And the image that you saw just play there is a reminder of planet Earth that is hurting, that is sick, with poison, that is in pain, that is dying. And the call is really for the organic movement of Oceania Pacifica to awaken and come and save planet Earth. Planet Earth is calling out, saying, "You are my last hope." In keeping with our Pacific tradition, we will now open our proceedings with a prayer. And to lead us this morning is the Poet.com founding member and also board chair, Mr. Nambo Moses, who joins us from Vanuatu. Thank you, Mr. Moses.
Please go ahead, Moses.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Talova Nisambula Finaka. Before we continue our sessions, I would like us to bow our heads for a word of prayer. Our Heavenly Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Father, this is the mandate that you have given mankind to replenish the earth, to cultivate the earth, to bring out the best from the earth, to feed its citizens. Thank you, Father, for this mandate. We just ask you to continue to be with us in this meeting. And Father, we pray for those that are listening all over this region. Father, this is our prayer this morning. In Jesus' mighty name, we pray. Amen.
Amen. And thank you very much for the opening prayer, Mr. Moses. Again, Poet.com founding member and board chair, joining us live from his island home in Vanuatu. We'll hear from Mr. Nambo later on in the formalities this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, next month in Rome, as most of you would know, the UN Secretary General will convene a food systems summit as part of the decade of action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, by 2030. The summit will awaken the world to the fact that we all must work together to transform the way the world produces, consumes, and thinks about food. It is a summit for everyone, everywhere, a people summit. It is also a solution summit that will require everyone to take action to transform the world's food systems. Now, to set the tone for our food systems dialogue today is the promotional and advocacy video for this year's United Nations Food Systems Summit.
Food is more than just what we eat. The ways in which we produce, process, and consume food touches every aspect of life on this planet. It is the foundation of our cultures, our economies, and our relationship with the natural world, and has the power to bring us together as families, communities, and nations.
Families and children are on the brink of famine.
But today's food systems are fragile and unequal. When they fail, there are ripple effects around the world, and the pandemic has impacted the most vulnerable among us. But we know what we need to do to get back on track. We have an opportunity to build back stronger than ever. Transforming our food systems is possible and necessary, and we can set a course to make real change for the benefit of all people by bringing together key players from around the world and giving voice to citizens in every country. Because a strong food system means
no matter your race, no matter your class, no matter where you live,
women and men have equal opportunities to produce and access nutritious food,
which promotes human health at every step
without degrading land and water resources.
Significa una agricultura familiar,
provide us, the community, with stability
all year round, every month, every day of the week,
even during a pandemic.
We are all connected, and we all have a responsibility to act. We must be bold. We must think and act differently. Transforming our food systems is the most powerful action we can take to solve our biggest problems. Because together,
we can build a just and resilient world.
A just and resilient world
where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind. Join us today.
The video, again, a reminder that we all have a responsibility to act. We must be bold. We must think and act differently, because together we can build a just and resilient world. So let's carry this call to action and thinking into our dialogue and our deliberations today. I welcome those that are just joining us, coming through there online. Welcome to the official opening of this Oceania Pacifica Organic Food Systems Dialogue, uniting the Oceania Pacifica organic voices. So again, I'm glad we're able to complete the full video there. But again, as I mentioned earlier, and as the video rightfully says, we all have a responsibility to act. We must be bold. We must think and act differently, because together, as you heard there, we can build a just and resilient world. So let's carry this call to action and thinking into our dialogue and our deliberations today. And again, I thank you for your patience with us as we work through the technical challenges. Again, it's the beauty of doing things online in this new normal that we are now living in. I'd like to begin by acknowledging first and foremost the keynote speaker for today, the Honorable Vice President of French Polynesia, Monsieur Thierry Moana Alpha, the Deputy Director of the Pacific Community, Dr. Paula Vivilli, our distinguished speakers you'd see in the program that you would have been sent earlier, our organic farmers, friends and colleagues from the organic movement, youth of the Oceania Pacific Organic Movement, and again to you, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all on behalf of the organizers, the task force that put this program together, to this Oceania Pacifica Organic Food System Dialogue, uniting the Oceania Pacifica Organic Voices to the World webinar. Oceania Pacifica consists of the organic movements of Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Island country and territories of the Pacific Community region. As I speak, there is a simultaneous French translation for our organic movements of the French territories, namely French Polynesia, New Caledonia, and Wallis and Futuna. And we acknowledge the translation support that we're receiving today by the EU SPC Protégé project. Our webinar today boasts a total of over 180 registered participants from around our region and beyond. And it's my honor to welcome our panel of speakers in the opening formalities this morning. The Pacific Community, through its Land Resources Division and its Pacific Organic and Ethical Trade Community Program, is a key convener and the facilitator of the task force, as I mentioned earlier, that's coordinated and put together today's dialogue. And to welcome you all is the Deputy Director General, Science and Capability of the Pacific Community, Dr. Paula Vivilli. By way of introduction, prior to this role, Dr. Vivilli was the Director of the Public Health Division of the Pacific Community for 6 years. He holds undergraduate degrees in Human Nutrition from the University of Otago and Medicine, University of the South Pacific, as well as a master's degree in International Public Health from the University of Sydney. In addition, he has also undertaken a World Health Organization fellowship at the University of Auckland and also Auckland Hospital in ophthalmology. I now invite and welcome and invite Dr. Vivilli to deliver his welcoming remarks. Thank you, Dr. Vivilli.
His Excellency, Monsieur Thierry Moana Alpha, Vice President of the Government and People of French Polynesia, Ms. Shamika Mone, President, Intercontinental Network of Organic Farmers Organization, INOFO, and convener of the dialogue, Karen Mapsua, Vice President of IFOAM Organics International World Board and Director of SPC's Land Resources Division, members of the Oceania Pacifica Organic Movements, officials, development partners, farmers organizations, distinguished speakers and facilitators, members of the event organizing team with representatives from NASA, Australian National Council, Soil and Health of New Zealand, Bio-Caledonia Organic Organization, SPC EU Protege Project, and POETCOM Secretariat. Bula Vinaka and Pacific greetings. On behalf of our dialogue convener, the Intercontinental Network of Organic Farmers Organization, it's my pleasure and honor to welcome you all to the Oceania Pacifica Organic Food Systems Dialogue. Thank you for taking time to participate today and to lending your voice to this process, which is so critical to supporting our region's progress towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The upcoming Global Food Systems Summit in September will launch bold new actions to deliver progress on all 17 SDGs, each of which relies on healthier, more sustainable, and more equitable food systems. The September summit will remind the world of the fact that we must all work together to transform the way the world produces, consumes, and thinks about food. It will be a solutions summit that will require everyone to take action to transform the world's food systems. Today's dialogue is part of the Intercontinental Network of Organic Farmers Organizations regional dialogues that are also underway in Asia, Africa, South America, Europe, and North America. The outcomes of today's dialogue will add valuable regional insights into the INOFO Global Report that will be presented to the United Nations Food Summit. Although today's dialogue is centered around using organic practices to boost nature-positive food production, in the course of your conversations, you will also emphasize the linkages where organic agriculture is the vehicle to address, build resilience, advance equitable livelihoods, shift to sustainable consumption patterns, and ensure that everybody has access to safe and nutritious food. As SPC's Deputy Director General of Science and Capability and former Director for Public Health, recreating food systems that reverse the prevalence of nutrition-related non-communicable diseases in the Pacific and globally is a top priority for me personally. Particularly so when around 70% of all deaths in our region is caused by NCDs, and an estimated 80% of these that are preventable. I'm glad to see the strong link between organic farming and NCD mitigation. I hope that today's presentations, bringing Australia, New Zealand, and Pacific organic stakeholders together, will propose evidence and experience-based, radical, game-changing solutions to transform food production systems that work for both people and nature. Your dialogue will provide platform for diversified voices, ensuring fair and equitable representation of people of different genders, ages, cultures, and from different countries, territories, and sub-regions. I wish you all great success in this lofty and important task here today, and I look forward to the results of your collective wisdom and experience, the organic, nature-positive fruits of your labors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vivilli, for your opening remarks there. And again, reiterating the actions that we must take to transfer the world's food systems, and of course, linked to non-communicable diseases and the rising numbers in our region. Thank you very much, Dr. Vivilli, for your opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now hear from the president of the Intercontinental Network of Organic Farmers Organization, Ms. Shamika Mone. Shamika is a researcher turned organic farmer and entrepreneur from Kerala, India. Since the Organic World Congress in 2017, Shamika was elected and is now president of the Intercontinental Network of Organic Farmers Organization, or in short, INOFO. INOFO is a self-organized structure within IFO, Organics International. Shamika is also an organic farmer growing traditional rice varieties and vegetables on 4 acres farmland in India. She's also second-generation leadership in the national organization, the OFAI, the Organic Farming Association of India, where she was elected treasurer and is also a managing committee member. Shamika holds a Bachelor of Science in Microbiology and a Master's of Science in Biodiversity from the University of Pune in India. She joins us today all the way from India through a video message. We will now hear from her.
Hello and welcome to you all.
for joining this Food System Summit Dialogue organized by INOFO Oceania Pacifica. As you all may know, INOFO, Intercontinental Network of Organic Farmers Organization, is a self-organized structure within IFOAM Organics International, which brings together the organic farmers' voices from all over the globe. Though within INOFO we started talking since 2008, our General Assemblies formalized since 2011. Since then, within INOFO, we are trying to bring this loose network of organic farmers' organizations into a well-structured organization that will bring together and strengthen organic farmers' voices at all levels of food systems development. Promoters of Green Revolution and the multinational companies associated with it have always been talking about higher yields, higher production, and obviously we know it's for higher profits, devaluing the nutrition-packed traditional seeds, knowledge and practices that our organic farmers have keeping together for generations. We all know that the poverty and hunger that is increasing globally is not because of less production of food, but because of the uneven distribution of food that happens around the globe. Excess of food production in certain regions and exporting the excess to other parts of the world has affected the cost of small-scale production on small farms and has definitely affected, and in the long run, it will take the small-scale farmers out of the food systems. As you may all know, the United Nations Food Systems Summit is getting organized and planned in September this year, and they have invited different sectors of the society to give their perspectives and opinions about the food systems that we want in future. However, there are debates getting surfaced as to which direction this food systems summit will take and how will it ensure the problems around hunger, malnutrition, and social justice when it comes to the building and designing of the solutions. Many civil society organizations around the globe have even gotten to an extent and have their own counter event called as the Global People's Summit. INOFO, among a few farmer organizations, have got this opportunity to get into the formal proceedings of the Food Systems Summit dialogues, and hence we have invited you all here to give your opinions, perspectives, knowledge, solution, and also share your challenges in the existing food systems, which we can take into consideration openly and note down to have it included in the formal declaration that INOFO will submit to the United Nations Food Systems Summit. So I welcome you all to please, with an open heart, open and express your thoughts, your knowledge on ground, and contribute to this food systems dialogue organized by INOFO. Thank you very much.
We thank Shamika there for her remarks and the insights again coming through from our speakers that we need to consider in our dialogue today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to our official opening address, and I'm delighted to welcome the Vice President of French Polynesia, Monsieur Thierry Te Moana Alpha. Monsieur Thierry Te Moana Alpha is also the Minister for Agriculture, Blue Economy and the Domain, in charge of research of French Polynesia. Now, French Polynesia has made various inroads with organic agriculture. This year, they voted a new policy to make the agriculture sector a real lever for social economic development for all archipelagos for the next 10 years until 2030. Food security and sustainability of the local food systems are two of the main targets of this policy, and organic agriculture will be pushed to achieve these goals. Now, for his keynote address, again delivered through video, we welcome Monsieur Thierry Te Moana Alpha, the Vice President of French Polynesia.
Yorana, bonjour aux participants des gouvernements du Pacifique, aux membres des organisations régionales et internationales du développement agricole, aux membres du mouvement Pacifica organique, à la direction de la communauté du Pacifique Sud et ses équipes, à tous les participants connectés sur la thématique des systèmes alimentaires. Le gouvernement de Polynésie française considère la pêche et l'agriculture comme un secteur économique stratégique pour améliorer sa sécurité alimentaire, développer des activités et des emplois directs et induits, pour renforcer la cohésion sociale dans les 5 archipels polynésiens d'une superficie totale de 5 millions de kilomètres carrés. Notre schéma directeur de l'agriculture pour les 10 années à venir, approuvé en février 2021, repose sur 4 fondements. Premièrement, retrouver le lien qui unit l'homme à la terre. L'agriculture naturelle et biologique correspond à une aspiration profonde de la population polynésienne d'aujourd'hui. Elle n'est pas un retour vers le passé, mais une valeur culturelle profondément enracinée en chacun de nous. Deuxièmement, reconnaître la multifonctionnalité de l'agriculture qui contribue par ses diverses fonctions économiques, sociales, environnementales, au développement humain. Troisièmement, valoriser les pratiques agro-environnementales et reconnaître les services environnementaux fournis par l'agriculteur. Et enfin, placer la Polynésie dans le mouvement mondial du développement durable. De nouvelles approches mondiales sont nécessaires concernant les ressources naturelles. Elles font le lien entre agriculture, sécurité alimentaire, nutrition et réduction de la pauvreté et des inégalités. Nos programmes d'action visent à produire de manière durable une alimentation saine et équitable. Cette ambition privilégie l'agriculture familiale et les réseaux de petites entreprises agroalimentaires et soutient les circuits alternatifs à la grande distribution de façon à mieux partager la valeur ajoutée créée et valoriser les produits dans des filières de proximité et pour l'exportation avec des labels qualitatifs. Un contrat pluriannuel pour l'innovation agroécologique, pour lequel un financement de l'Union européenne est sollicité, sera le cœur du dispositif de soutien et d'accompagnement à cette transition en Polynésie. Il articulera des mesures économiques, environnementales et climatiques dans le cadre d'un contrat de partenariat incitatif. Notre politique s'inscrit ainsi dans 2 programmes, celui de l'European Green Deal et celui de l'Organisation des Nations Unies pour l'alimentation et l'agriculture. Suite à la demande officielle d'adhésion de la Polynésie française à l'Organisation des Nations Unies pour l'alimentation et l'agriculture, et dans le cadre du programme de développement des Nations Unies à l'horizon 2030, la Polynésie française va promouvoir sans ambiguïté une agriculture et une alimentation agroécologique. Il convient également de mentionner le projet de création d'un centre de ressources océaniennes, porté conjointement par la Polynésie française, le Palaos et les États fédérés de Micronésie, auprès du programme Kiwa. Cette initiative, lancée par la France et l'Union européenne en 2020, vise à renforcer la résilience des écosystèmes et des économies des États et territoires du Pacifique, en collaboration avec le Canada, la Nouvelle-Zélande, l'Australie, mais aussi avec la communauté du Pacifique, le programme régional océanien pour l'environnement et l'UICN. Ce projet ambitionne la mise en réseau sur ces 3 territoires des solutions basées sur la nature et des systèmes de gestion traditionnels et intégrés développés au niveau d'un ensemble d'aires terrestres et marines. Aussi, avec le gouvernement du président Fritsch, le renforcement de la coopération bilatérale autour du secteur primaire avec les collectivités françaises du Pacifique, le développement de la coopération régionale avec l'Australie, la Nouvelle-Zélande et les États insulaires du Pacifique, avec l'appui de l'Union européenne, constitue une fenêtre d'opportunité de développement. En définitive, la Polynésie française s'est résolument engagée dans une dynamique de coopération régionale et internationale pour faire de la transition agroécologique un véritable socle du nouveau projet de société résilient et inclusif pour notre système alimentaire. J'invite maintenant tous les participants au séminaire à contribuer activement à cette thématique importante de l'alimentation pour nos populations et notre autonomie du Pacifique Sud. Je vous remercie.
We thank the Vice President there for his keynote address and again the insights as well that we can consider as we go into today's dialogue. And now, ladies and gentlemen, to move the vote of thanks as we wrap up our opening formalities is Mr. Nambo Moses, who delivered the opening prayer for us. As I mentioned, he's the founding member of PoetCom and also the board chair. He, for 30 years now, He's been the Principal Livestock Officer in the Department of Livestock under the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Forestry, Fisheries, and Biosecurity in Vanuatu. Mr. Nambo is a firm believer and a convert in the paradigm shift from conventional farming practices to traditional farming practices or organic farming practices. His dream is to see his country of Vanuatu lead in organics in the Pacific. Mr. Nambo, as I mentioned, is currently the chair of Poet.com, of which he is also a founding member. When not working, he enjoys working with soil planting. He loves serving God, from whom he says his entire being depends on daily. We'll now cross to Mr. Nambo Moses in Vanuatu. Thank you, Mr. Moses.
Thank you very much for all the speeches that we've had. His Excellency Terry Moana Alpha, the Vice President of the French Polynesia, our Deputy Director General, Mr. Paula Vivilli, and the President of Intercontinental Network of Farmers, Organic Farmers Organization, NIOFO, Shamika Mone, our Vice President of IFOM World Board and Director of Land Resource, Karen Mapisua, all board members who are listening around the region, and distinguished guests and panelists. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all for participating in this very, very important dialogue. And as the dialogue says, it speaks for itself. The food systems that we have globally, as reiterated by Innovo President, that it is enough if we are distributing it fairly across our continent. But in saying so, I would like to thank you all, farmers, organic farmers around, that are supplying all our nutritious food to our participants, our families, and people that are around us, so that they can have enough to take into their family's house and enjoy. In Organic.com would like to see a lot more about our labeling of our products, whether it be BTS or third party using POS or Pacific Organic Standard. We'd like to thank you all, certifiers that have used POS within the region to certify our products. And in saying so, I'd like to thank you all for this dialogue. Please continue to bring up our issues within our region that you feel that we can work together collaboratively to bring to the table of organic farmers, our farms, and all our food systems, so that whatever we do, it is for the best interest of our population that are behind us and the people that we farm to serve and to feed in our region. With saying so, I thank you all for this meeting. I wish we could meet face to face, but it is in this season, in this crisis that we are, that we should engage as we are doing now throughout the entire year, or maybe when the situation comes, we would like to see this happen most frequently. Thank you very much. Finaka Whakalevu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nambo, for the vote of thanks and for rounding off our opening formalities. Ladies and gentlemen, again, we thank you for your patience with us as we were working through the technical requirements of the meeting, and again, the complications of having to do this online and provide interpretation as the proceedings are happening. So we do thank you for your patience, and we hope that the opening formalities, if anything, has given you or set the tone for the discussions in the few sessions that we've got lined up for today. It now gives me great pleasure to welcome you to session 2 of today's dialogue program. If you see in the handout you were given, or the program, it's titled Inspirational Panel. And to drive this session is the director of the Pacific Community's Land Resources Division, someone everyone knows, Ms. Karen Mapusua. She, by way of introduction, is the first woman ever appointed to this role. Karen is leading the development of an integrated program to strengthen Pacific food systems for improved health, nutrition, and resilience outcomes, and has been actively involved in project development to support the economic empowerment of women through agriculture value chains. She has experience in NGO capacity building and management and has worked in rural development in the Pacific region for close to 20 years, with a focus on organic agriculture as a path to social and economic development. While working for Women in Business Development Incorporated in Samoa, she supported the establishment of this Pacific Organic and Ethical Trade Community, or POETCOM, where she then served as coordinator for 5 years. Now, during this time, Karen was extensively involved in developing the Pacific Organic Standard and Guarantee Scheme, an alternative form of certification that empowers farmers. Karen is also currently the vice president of IFO, Organics International, and has previously served on the board of directors of Fairtrade Australia and Australia New Zealand. She's a national of Samoa as well as Australia. Now, for me, that rounds off my assignment for the opening formalities. I'll hand over the facilitation to Karen now and say goodbye here and wish you all the very best in your deliberations today. From me, Vinaka, stay safe, everyone. And talofa lava, and over to you now, Karen. Thank you.
Vinaka inoke, and welcome everybody. Acknowledgement to all the speakers in the opening session. We greatly appreciated your words to open our discussion today. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the various lands on which we all stand and where we share our experience and our points of view for this meeting. I'm very pleased to be facilitating this dialogue today. We all know that the way we farm and eat has major implications on health, environment, and social well-being. So if we get agriculture and food systems right, they can become a strong, positive force for good. And that's where organic comes in. Organic agriculture is defined by the principles of health, ecology, fairness, and care. In the Pacific, we also include culture, and these are the basis of our food system and can significantly contribute to addressing global environmental and social challenges. But in order to fully utilize its potential, organic agriculture needs to grow, continuously improve its performance, and inspire mainstream agriculture. The question is how to get there when organic remains a relatively small part of all agricultural production. The ideas about organic agriculture were formed over 100 years ago. The pioneers of our movement from various places around the world saw the connections between the food we eat, the way we produce that food, our health, and the health of the planet. They laid out how people can healthily nourish themselves while protecting the environment. In this digital age, we refer to that time as Organic 1.0. Since the early 70s, organic movements around the globe started to shape these visions of pioneers into a practical reality. Production and processing standards, many private actors, and standards by governments were developed, and certification schemes were introduced, which helped gain the trust of consumers and policymakers. With this focus on defining and certification, the number of organic producers, as well as the consumption of organic products, grew tremendously in many parts of the world. So we could say this was Organic 2.0. On the back of this history, organic farming is now in a position to help make global agriculture and food systems more sustainable. Where we talk about organic, it's not just talking about certified organic products. It's about all the sustainable and regenerative practices and systems we can offer to mainstream agriculture to help shift all agricultural production to a more sustainable model. So Organic 3.0 is the broad uptake of truly sustainable systems based around these organic principles. To enable this uptake and get the impacts we're looking for with regard to transforming food systems, we need 6 things. First, we need a culture of innovation to stimulate greater farmer conversion and adoption of best practices, to proactively combine the best traditional practices with modern innovations. All practice, knowledge, and innovation must be assessed against the risks and potential impacts. 2, we need continuous improvement towards best practice for operators all along the value chain. And that covers all the dimensions of sustainability: ecology, society, economy, culture, and accountability. 3, we need diverse ways to ensure integrity. We have to broaden the uptake of organic agriculture beyond third-party certification. We need to build trust in the market through transparency and integrity. 4th, we need to include wider sustainability interests. We have to proactively build alliances with the many movements and organizations that have complementary approaches to sustainable food and farming. 5, we need empowerment from the farmer to the consumer to recognize the interdependence and the real partnerships along the value chain. We must particularly acknowledge the core position of small-scale and family farmers, gender, equality, and fair trading principles. And 6, we need true cost or true value accounting. And this means the costs and benefits of external effects must be internalized to encourage transparency for consumers and policymakers, and to empower farmers as partners with rights. So, for example, the cost of damage to a coastal fishery by an agricultural enterprise must be included in the cost of those agricultural products when they reach the consumer. On the other hand, farmers would be compensated for providing ecosystem services. So imagine a food production system built on these, covering all dimensions of sustainability: ecology, society, economy, culture, and accountability. Then we have a truly sustainable and transformative food system. And not just one where no one is left behind, but one where all have the opportunity to truly thrive. And these, I believe, are the messages that the United Nations Food System Summit needs to hear, and the solutions it needs to enact. So, getting to the meat of our meeting. You've all heard about the Food System Summit. It was called by the Secretary General. And the idea is for us to transform that summit, to transform our food systems. You've also heard that there is some debate around this and what the outcomes will be, and if they will truly benefit producers, particularly small producers. Next slide, please, Numia. So the United Nations Food Summit has 5 objectives, which have become to be called action tracks. The first one is ensuring safe and nutritious food for all. The second is shifting to sustainable consumption patterns. The third, boosting nature-positive food production. 4th, advancing equitable livelihoods of people involved in food systems. And 5, building resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks, and stresses. These summit action tracks are the mechanism of the dialogue process to create or identify game-changing solutions that will really shift the dial on each of these focus areas and bring us closer to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. So today we're focusing on action track 3, boosting nature-positive production. Now, the Food System Summit defined this as production characterized by regenerative, non-depleting, non-destructive use of natural resources. It is based on biodiversity as the foundation of ecosystem services, soil, water, and climate regulation. So it sounds like they're talking our language. This is the heart of organic agriculture, and where we have so much to offer from our rich agricultural heritage in our region, as well as our innovations. So today, the organic movement, and in particular, organic farmers from the Oceania Pacifica region, get to put our heads together on this and share your experience, knowledge and skill and passion into this dialogue process. Next slide, please. The dialogue will be in 3 parts. First, we'll have some opening reflections just to stimulate thinking about the vision and opportunities for organic food systems. And we have 5 amazing speakers to share some thoughts with you. We then go into small breakout groups to identify some of those potential game-changing solutions. You've been assigned based on your preferences when you registered. So Zoom will automatically whisk you away to the right group, hopefully, and you'll have about 30 minutes to have those facilitated discussions. After 30 minutes, we'll bring you back into the plenary for the last section, where we'll be sharing a few short videos of some of our farmers who grow our food, and then we'll have the presentation back from those groups and the wrapping up for the day. I'll encourage you to use the chat function to share any ideas or thoughts or questions. Realistically, we know we won't get to answer them all, but we will use them when we're developing the final report for submission to the summit. Next slide, please. So now some time for inspiration to spark some of those ideas. So our 5 speakers for the day. On the theme of our people, culture, traditions, land and sea, we have Papali'i, Dr. Failautusi Abengealo from the University of Hawaii Manoa, Shidler College of Business, and Moko Morris from Te Waka Kaiora, the Maori Organic Authority of Aotearoa. On the theme, our health, we have Andre Loy, an organic farmer, Director of Regeneration International, former IFERM Organics International President, and author of Poisoning Our Children and the Myths of Safe Pesticides. And the final theme, our innovations, we have farmers. We have Gilles Tehau-Parsi, who is a PortCom founding member, works as an auditor for BioAgriCert, and is an organic consultant. And Frank Soure-Lavong, a farmer and current president of BioCaledonia, the Organic Association of New Caledonia. So now to our first speaker, Papali'i, also known as Dr. Tusi. He is a Pacific Islander and an advocate for holistic and systems-based development. Dr. Tusi is the first business professor to the University of Hawaii from Oceania and is a highly rated lecturer on cross-cultural leadership and organizational behavior, systems and theory for academic, corporate, community, student and Indigenous groups. He works to reconcile and weave the perspectives of traditional wisdom and culture with modern science, knowledge, technology by building on the strengths of both, discarding the negative, and creating a third option with value added. He was born in American Samoa and raised in 2 coastal villages in American Samoa and in Samoa. He holds the Ali'i title of Papali'i as a senior heir to the Sa Malietoa Talavo line of Samoa. Handing over to you now, Dr. Tusi.
Well, thank you very much. This is really a great pleasure. With the limited time I have, I'd like to just touch on some things I hope would be able to be food for thought in your gatherings. I think one of the things that we had to deal with was what was the operational definition of sustainability. So at the College of Business, we deal with economics and a bunch of issues related to that. But from my perspective, culture is far more compelling. And the ability to sustain a certain practice is what we associate with sustainability. That means if existing practices should be sustained, well, what if they are degenerative? So perhaps I prefer to use the word regenerative. And but before I get into that, I think it's really important that we have a basic understanding of our own worldview. How do you perceive the world. Right now, we're discarding Isaac Newton's perception of the universe as a sealed clock that operates like with machine-like regularity. Well, guess what? That is, we no longer accept that because we now have the science of quantum mechanics and the theory of entanglement, that everything is connected to everything else. Another issue is when we talk about these kinds of methods and approaches, we need to not forget the language of our traditional elders and the wisdoms of our people. They don't use technical terminologies associated with models, with systems, or with technologies. Don't forget, they always use the word love. They always use the word kinship. They always use the word relationships. And so if you don't have that sense, how do you know Mother Earth is suffering? But our traditions maintain that alignment, lest we forget that we do not allow knowledge to outrun the wisdom that has been passed on. When we speak about healing the planet, it's important. I always listen for certain words. The three most prominent is love, aloha, balance, and harmony. And yet many of the polemics and the highly technical reports and the publications are far from that. They're never mentioned at all. And another important feature, if we are speaking about healing the planet, our Mother Earth, our moana, our ocean, our mountains, our rivers, we must first seek a means in which her voice or their voices can be declared, can be made, can be defended, can be taught. And there is a major change that is occurring, and I'm so excited about that. 3 of the major events. 1, 2017, if you take a look at the Te Awa Tupua bill in New Zealand, what they did was they extended legal personhood to a river, the Wanganui River. Now, that's a landmark case for the rights of nature. Finally, nature has a voice in the courts and in other arenas. And to put it in contrast, in 2010, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that a corporation was a person. That's interesting. We give personhood to a thing, a concept, a piece of paper, and yet there's objections when we give personhood and legal right to be represented to a living entity like a river, like an ocean, like plants to our kin. And of course, all of this is emerging, but these are the kinds of things that you should be thinking about. Restorative development is what we need to be looking at, and I'm a very strong advocate of it. Restorative development basically is heavily rooted because it's regenerative in nature. It's giving back the materials and the energies that is extracted from the earth. Give it back so it can renew and replenish and continue the cycle. Nowhere in Oceania do you find the word, or do you see a natural practice of monocropping. In fact, the closest thing to it would be cross-cropping. But we see agroforests and as the norm for all of our villages and all of our practices. We need to look at our traditional foods and plants simply because they've survived resilience in a resilient and adaptive way for centuries. Every new agricultural import comes with pesticides, fertilizers, and other chemically based support. And so we'll say, well, we need them. Well, let's revisit. Do you really? Or are we ignoring and not doing enough with our own traditional foods to finally realize that we do not need to live off a store shelf to sustain our livelihoods? And lastly, of course, is what we're working currently on with Breadfruit. And the research on Breadfruit we've been working on for over 10 years. We use researchers and biochemists from all over the world. Guess what? Breadfruit has more plant protein than any other vegetable known on Earth. It's also very high gluten-free as well as low glycemic index ingredients. The highest death rate in the world due to heart disease and diabetes is in Oceania. Why? Because the imported foods we have are very high gluten and very high glycemic index. People don't know. You pick up the taro leaves and the male flower that falls to the ground. Well, research by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Department of Defense discovered that if you burn these dried male flowers, the smoke is 3 times more potent than the leading compound in the leading pesticide on the shelf. Yeah, and it's not only organic, it's natural, and it's something our ancestors have used. We have now discovered it also contains squalene. Squalene, it comes out of the leaves and of the flower itself. Why is it important? Because it's now being looked at as a source for the COVID-19 vaccine. It is also for medical studies have been seen to have a significant impact on cancer. So you have all of these kinds of developments in which we're so busy just looking at flower that this is an example of so many gifts that nature has blessed our islands with, but we're just looking at the tip because all of this requires hard work and reconnecting with the past, especially with our ancestors. We need to look at systemic regenerative technologies. We've been working on it for 10 years. Why are they? They're small enough, they're distributive. They can meet islands. They can convert waste into byproducts that can help replace fertilizers. We've got a technology, we're ready to roll these things out in September that can generate 1 million gallons of fresh water from the ocean. The key words for me is regenerative and life-healing consciousness. And we need to be able to focus that. We need to focus on healing versus fixing. What's the difference? One requires a mechanic, the other requires a gardener. Be the gardener for your communities, for your region, and for the world. Thank you.
I think that's wonderful. Be the gardener. What a wonderful way to end that. Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry that we don't have more time to spend with each of our speakers today. We'll be moving now to Moko Morris from Te Waka Kai Ora, and she'll be speaking on Hua Parakore, the Maori Organics Validation and Verification in New Zealand. Moko is Secretary of Te Waka Kai Ora, the National Maori Organics Authority, and the Kaitai, apologies for my Maori, it's just not the same as Samoan, Kaitaiaki or Guardian of the Hua Parakore Indigenous Validation and Verification System. In 2019, as the co-chair of the Sustainable Development Goals Stakeholder Group, Moko co-authored the People's Report on the 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals, an independent review on the New Zealand government's progress on the UN SDGs. She's no stranger in the New Zealand sustainability world, working extensively with numerous organisations and community groups to establish ma'arakai or gardens, enhancing and promoting self-sufficiency for Maori communities. She was also a long-standing councillor and former co-chair of the Soil and Health Association of New Zealand, one of the world's oldest and the country's largest membership organisation supporting organic food and farming. Moko, very happy to hand over to you.
Oh, kia ora ana, bonjour, talofa lava, bula, he uri taku no te taira whiti no te tanga mahaki. So a question I'm often asked by my people is why do we need the SDGs and what relevance do they have for me in New Zealand? the overall situation of Indigenous peoples worldwide, including Aotearoa, can probably be best described as we're not left behind, but rather pushed further behind. This is due to land grabbing, widespread human rights violations, and worsening inequality. Land grabbing through the Public Works Act is still much a threat today in New Zealand. Indigenous peoples are excluded and almost invisible in most SDG national action plans and strategies globally, and holistic approaches to sustainable development are not recognised or protected or supported globally. Alarmingly, 80% of biodiversity is protected by Indigenous people worldwide, but only 10% of these territories have legal security. In 2019, at least 125 cases of political killings of Indigenous leaders occurred, mostly from defending land or organising people to defend land. There is an incredible lack of accountability and implementation of human rights obligations of states to Indigenous people, including failure to act on recommendations made by human rights advocates and organisations. So the SDGs are a framework, and we're right to be sceptical, but they're the only global framework we have to unite us. But we have a food solution. Hua Parakore is the world's first Indigenous verification system for food and products based on traditional Māori key concepts. It was developed in 2011 by a number of people who could see that spirituality was notably absent from existing organic frameworks. Hua Parakore is a realisation of community-driven philosophies that ensure product purity and integrity that corresponds with cultural practices. It can best be described as kaiatua, food from our gods that has had no interference. It is based on the infinite diversity and richness that is located within diverse tribal groups. It is a standard of excellence for products and promotes the re-establishment of native trade and diverse living communities. It's based on Wairua, which is spiritual health, safety and balance of the land, Mana, autonomy, security and self-determination, Modi, the vibrant energy for growth, Maramatanga, the incitement and enlightenment that we all gain, Te Ao Tūroa, the expression of the divinity of our deities, and Whakapapa, our natural connections to our land, our ecosystems and each other. So it can best be described as a korowai or a cloak to existing organic standards, and yes, you can have dual certification. It is very well supported in New Zealand by the New Zealand organic sector. We're well supported by OANZ and by the New Zealand Soil and Health Association. It's still a 3-year process, so producers are awarded the Hua Parakore tohu on their products when they complete their 3 years. But a beautiful part of this process is that it's not for, so Te Waka Kaiora are the organisation, Hua Parakore is the system, and it's not for us to verify. So if you were going to verify your product or your land, you would have to invite your community to do that for you. So after 3 years, they would come in and they would validate that, yes, they endorse the fact that you've been living among these key concepts, and their testimony is their endorsement to your getting your tohu. So without that, your community basically have to support that process. We understand that growing good food and writing about growing good food are two different skill sets, so being adaptable and finding other ways to record that information is key. And we also acknowledge that we learn through our bodies and our spirits as well as our mind. Hua Parakore is attractive to those who are not necessarily Māori as well, because it resonates with a deeper connection to Papatuanuku, our Earth Mother, and offers a holistic view of the land and care that is missing from people's lives. Hua Parakore works for both people and nature. It's also a transferable system that can be adapted to any culture. There's a Hua Parakore farm, Ma'o farms in Hawaii, that use their own language as well. From this, the process of decolonisation is essential to the future of food solutions. Decolonisation workshops are particularly important to the workplace and those agencies that hold all the perceived power. A good way to look at it is to liken it to a first aid certificate where you have to review it every couple of years, and committing to decolonisation strategies is essential. The easiest and most logical way to ensure Indigenous people are thriving rather than surviving is to give funding and decision-making power back to Indigenous peoples. This is a resilient future. The denial of the right to food for Indigenous people not only denies our physical survival, but also denies us our social organisation, our cultures, our traditions, our languages, our spirituality, our sovereignty, and our total identity. Our biggest threat to food sovereignty is synthetic biology. We must reshape pesticide regulation to conduct chemical risk assessments on the formulation instead of the active ingredient. We must insist that studies used in pesticide regulation are published in scientific journals and not hidden by confidential commercial agreements. Everyone has a part to play, but first we need to clean up our own backyards. We need to stop telling people what they can't do and give them the tools to see what they can do. We need a Pacific Island revolution to kickstart our senses and remind people that we are here. We've been through pandemics and we are not going anywhere. We need to strengthen our infrastructures, our governance and our organisation so that we're strong. So when the late adopters finally decide to join us, we are ready to receive them with multiple entry points and able for them to participate. We must shift the mindset from needs and deficiencies to assets and capabilities. We have the answers. Finally, I'd like to leave you with a quote from a well-known woman called Eva Rickard from Whangarua, New Zealand, who was a lovely Māori activist, a wonderful woman. And she said, "Lead, follow, or get out of the way." Kia ora.
Thank you so much, Moko. And I hope that we will be leading today. Thank you for those words. I had the opportunity to sit in one of our regional planning meetings with governments a week or so ago, and the governments of the Pacific were asking for a recognition of faith in the regional planning documents. So I'm hoping that there is increasing movement on those spaces. We'll be handing next to Andre Loy to speak about health, one of these interconnected themes. Andre, as we said earlier, is the International Director of Regeneration International, an organisation that promotes food, farming and land use systems that regenerate and stabilise climate systems, the health of the planet and people. He's one of the experts in these fields, having spent over 45 years working and visiting countries and developing new crops and systems across the globe. Besides the two books entitled Poisoning Our Children and the Myths of Safe Pesticides, he's published extensively in a wide variety of media. He was the longest-serving president of IFOAM Organics International, and he's currently an IFOAM ambassador. He lectures and teaches at numerous conferences, seminars, and workshops, as well as United Nations events on every continent, speaking on the multifunctional benefits of regenerative agriculture and on the science of increasing soil organic matter to both mitigate and adapt to climate change. Andre and his wife Julia have an organic tropical fruit farm in Daintree, Australia. Over to you, Andre.
Thanks, Karen. And I can tell you today it doesn't feel too tropical here. We've got snow to the south of us, and it's probably only about 22 degrees Celsius, which for us is very chilly. But I just want to say very quickly too, I just couldn't agree more about breadfruit. I think it's probably one of the most important trees on this planet and food crops. One tree can feed a whole family for 1 year. I can't think of anything that is so great. And I just want to say to actually one of my favorite breadfruits that I have here comes from Samoa, and the other one is from French Polynesia, from Tahiti. But anyway, what I've been asked to talk about is health, and particularly my specialty is pesticides, and Moko touched on some of the really important issues about it. I think, at the moment we're in a pandemic, but this pandemic will finish. We have something which is actually, it's called a global epidemic of non-communicable chronic diseases, but actually it's bigger than the pandemic. We should call it a global pandemic of non-communicable diseases. And these are diseases such as heart disease, stroke, cancer, chronic respiratory diseases. And it's an invisible pandemic. However, it is probably one of the leading causes of poverty and death and health and the burden, and ill health, and the burden is growing all the time. More and more peoples and families are being afflicted. The thing about these diseases, unlike COVID, is you cannot catch it because you sit next to someone. You're not going to get cancer because you sit next to someone who's got cancer or heart disease. These actually come from environmental and lifestyle, which is actually good news. It means we can prevent them by changing our habits and our foods and the environmental exposures. The literature strongly implicates pesticides and chemicals. So I'd just like to give you an example of probably one of the most common pesticides on the planet, glyphosate. And this is, I'm one of the co-authors of this study where we looked at a range of diseases in the United States. And for instance, this is one that really stood out for us, is the increase in the use of glyphosate in Roundup and the increase in autism in the United States. And we've stopped that in this graph in 2010, but I can tell you that it is still increasing, autism. When we published this, we were criticized. People said, oh, look, it's, correlation isn't causation, even though we actually, in the paper, gave very good examples in the literature how it is caused. The red line is the increase in glyphosate, and the bars are the increase in children being diagnosed with autism in the US. After we published it, there's a very good paper came out showing causation. And what you're seeing here is the growth of neurons, of nerve cells. And don't forget, our brains is our biggest collection of nerve cells. What you see, if you look at the first division, the control and glyphosate, you see as a cell grows, you can see the what we call the axons coming out. And where it's exposed to glyphosate, it's underdeveloped. And you can see the second division, you can see how the nerve cells that are exposed to glyphosate aren't developing properly. Then when you get to the final division, the fourth division, when it's fully grown, there's a big difference between the nerve cell and the what are called the dendrites, which the way it connects to other nerve cells that you build your neuron networks. You don't have the connections, which means that the brain is not fully developed. And once the nerves have formed like this, it's irreversible. What is really important in this study is it shows the actual pathways. There's cause. This study alone should have been enough to ban this chemical. But the other issue what we've got is an epidemic of cancer. And the United States presidential cancer panel under Obama, they were 30 of the world's major cancer specialists. And they looked at the literature. 80% of cancers are caused by environmental toxins. And they said, especially chemicals and pesticides. And this has been ignored. Think about it. We could prevent 80% of cancers by removing these toxins and then use the rest of our resources to cure the other 20%. Cancer could be finished, a minor disease, by changing, how we grow food and the poisons we're putting in the environment. So this is, once again, another graph from this study that I was a co-author on, and you're looking at the rate of thyroid cancer in the USA. And the green bar is the trend line before the amount of glyphosate increased because of the introduction of GMO crops. The blue line is the introduction of GMO crops. And because they are Roundup ready, that's why the red line, the Roundup, has increased. Look how it increases in step with cancer. Once again, people say, oh, correlation isn't causation. Well, not long after we published that, the World Health Organization, their international agency into research into cancer, put out a paper giving glyphosate, that's the active ingredient in Roundup, the second highest rating for causing cancer. And what this means, that the highest rating is where we have a lot of evidence that it causes cancer in humans. The second highest is where we have good evidence that it causes cancer in animals and some evidence that it causes cancer in humans. Most of that evidence in humans is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. That's why there is court cases. But I can tell you that the evidence in animals showed thyroid cancer, like in the graph I showed you before. So what I want to show here now is the last one when we're talking about the development of our children. And most people get their pesticides from food. Most people don't farm. And what the studies are showing here is that the smallest amount of pesticides in food, particularly organophosphates, cause brain damage in children. And this is very good science, again, using MRI scans. And you can actually physically see where the damage has happened in children's brains. And this has come because mum has eaten the average American diet and got these small amounts of pesticides from food. This should be enough to change how we farm. But I just want to end up, this is why we need organic farming and we need to end all of these pesticides, because this should be seen as child abuse. And the people who do that should be jailed for life. So I'll end it on that and just say what we are doing as organic farmers and what we're doing here in the Pacific community is just so important for the health of our next generation, because what sort of civilization poisons its children? So thank you.
Thank you, Andre. That's sobering to say the least. And knowing how liberally and freely those chemicals are used, not only in our farms, but around schoolyards and roadsides and everywhere else, it's something we all need to be very, very conscious of. Thank you.
Thank you.
The last two speakers will talk on the theme, Our Innovations. And I'm happy now to introduce Gilles Parzi-Tehau, speaking on the innovation of agroecology. Gilles has always lived very comfortably with his organic produce as a farmer, first near Nice in France from 1978. Then he says, married organically with the Polynesian culture from 1980. He founded Eden Park on the Leeward Islands, which is a certified organic botanical park. He has a university degree in agrobiology from France and now has two hats, one as a consultant and trainer in organic farming and agroecology, and second as the Pacific Agency Director for BioAgriCert, an international certification body. Gilles is one of the PortCom founders and has been a member of the board from the start. And he is a true warrior of Pacific organics. I'm happy to hand over to Gilles now. And Numia colleagues, if you can start his PowerPoint presentation, please.
Can you hear me? Thanks for those useful presentations. Okay, so I just would like to make these wishes a reality, and we are talking about agroecology to me, which is very concrete, and making agriculture a new culture. Of course, it's really important in the Pacific. Next slide, please. Okay. So our hot current challenge, you all know this, and I will ask for the next slide, please. So agroecology have been divided in 10 elements by FAO. To me, it's not really well organized but I will suggest a different framing for this. Please, next slide. Okay. So to me, these 10 FAO elements could be classified and simplified in 3 main criteria, which are already in the Pacific Organic Standard. So the first one, diversity, is mentioned many times in our Pacific Organic Standard. So this is, of course, as you know, a very important point. And with recycling, that gives synergy, resilience, efficiency, circular economy, which are the objective. The second point is culture and food tradition in accordance. Of course, this criteria means that culture and food tradition has to be in accordance with any farming, any also point which is respecting agroecology. So, and this now give the objectives that are mentioned in the FAO elements: responsible governance, co-creation and sharing, and solidarity. That's why it's just living in the Pacific since now centuries and millenniums. And the third point is human and social values, also, which can allow responsible and also needs responsible governance, co-creation and sharing, and solidarity. So this, to me, has to be simplified in 3 points. Next slide, please. So here I have mentioned again these 3 points with more details. And to make them real, we first need really adapted crops, adapted to climate, to existing context, and of course to culture. Also, this can be a criteria that can be normative. To make this happening on the ground, we need to have this clear in standards. So, to me, a minimum number of crops should be an important point in the control. Associated trees also and producing green manures are really important and unavoidable to make to have a real agroecology, because this make farmers empowered and they have their own organic matter on their farm. Then it's a matter of perennials and appropriate association or rotation. Of course, we have to, in this diversity, choose mainly perennials. We will see why in the next slide.
Gilles, I'm very sorry, you've only got 1 minute left.
Okay. So the details are there. Really adapted crops, minimum number of crops associated, and you have all the details on the right column. So this PowerPoint can be shared, and all the best to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilles. I'm very sorry to have to cut people off. I feel like the absolute devil doing that when there is so much important information there. But please be assured that we will make the presentations available in PDF format for people afterwards to refer back to and to get into the details that we didn't have time for today. So sincere apologies, Gilles. So our last speaker is from New Caledonia, Frank Soure-Lavong. Pardon my French if I did damage to that. And he's talking about innovation on organic farms. He is the president of Bio-Caledonia and comes from a line of farmers. He studied electrotechnics and worked in the sector for 6 years before realizing he belongs on the farm. So in 2009, he started to work on his brother's farm and became aware of the impact of conventional agriculture based on chemical use. In 2011, he decided to set up an organic farm to produce fruits and vegetables, breaking from the family tradition of conventional agriculture. He obtains his certification through Organic Pacifica in 2015 and was elected to the board of the Chamber of Agriculture of New Caledonia in 2017. He's now also serves as the president of New Caledonia's participatory guarantee system, Bio-Caledonia, since 2019. Frank, I'm very happy to hand over to you for your 5 minutes about innovations on your farm. Thank you.
Merci Karen, merci. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. C'est un honneur pour moi d'apporter humblement ma contribution au travail d'aujourd'hui. Cet événement est la preuve de la prise de conscience que le modèle de développement globalisé de ces dernières décennies est une voie sans issue. En Nouvelle-Calédonie, l'exportation du nickel issu du sous-sol est de très loin la principale activité économique. La part des produits locaux dans le total des achats alimentaires est faible. Et si l'agriculture traditionnelle est encore présente au niveau culturel, elle l'est beaucoup moins dans les repas quotidiens. L'agriculture a décliné face à l'accès facile à une nourriture bon marché venue de l'extérieur et la possibilité de travailler à des activités moins pénibles pour subsister. Pourtant, nous ne pouvons pas construire un avenir alimentaire résilient sans agriculteurs. Pour cela, il me semble indispensable de rendre notre métier attractif. Changer notre modèle agricole est impératif pour répondre aux enjeux climatiques, sanitaires et sociaux auxquels nous faisons face. Pour cela, il faut permettre aux agriculteurs de travailler et vivre dignement et valoriser leur contribution à un modèle de société, un environnement et une humanité en bonne santé. Les savoir-faire ancestraux nous montrent que pour être durable, la production de notre nourriture doit se baser sur des processus naturels et autonomes. L'histoire récente de l'agriculture dans nos territoires l'illustre. Mon arrière-grand-père fut envoyé parmi d'autres colons en Nouvelle-Calédonie pour y développer la culture de café. Pendant un temps, le pays comptait parmi les principaux producteurs mondiaux, avec un mode de production que l'on qualifierait aujourd'hui d'agroforesterie. La production s'est plus tard effondrée avec l'avènement de l'idée que pour augmenter la production, il fallait supprimer les arbres des caféeries. Les cycles naturels furent cassés. L'utilisation massive d'engrais inorganiques et de produits chimiques ne résolut rien et la filière s'effondra. Une démonstration que la modernité n'est pas forcément synonyme d'innovation. L'innovation, c'est utiliser les moyens en notre possession pour trouver des solutions à nos problèmes. La recherche scientifique permet de mieux comprendre les processus biologiques en jeu dans la fertilité des sols et la santé des plantes. La traduction en techniques applicables au champ est souvent plus difficile à trouver. Souvent, ce sont les agriculteurs eux-mêmes qui, dans leur contexte, trouvent les solutions, car nous avons au jour le jour une vision globale du système. Pour faciliter la mise en place de ces solutions qui proviennent du terrain, je pense qu'il faut encourager le plus largement possible le partage de savoir-faire afin d'augmenter la performance des fermes biologiques. Les réussites du réseau de fermes de démonstration en agroécologie dans le cadre du projet Protège en sont un exemple concret. Le démarrage d'un réseau complémentaire dans le programme Kiwa va dans ce sens également. Au niveau local, c'est tout l'intérêt du système participatif de garantie. L'agriculture n'est pas affaire de grands discours, mais de travail et de persévérance. Chaque récolte est riche d'apprentissage. Il faut systématiser la diffusion du savoir, afin que chacun bénéficie de l'expérience de l'ensemble, vertueusement. L'innovation, c'est aussi clarifier les regards sur les coûts réels des différents systèmes alimentaires. Un produit qui a parcouru la moitié du monde pour arriver jusqu'à ma table ne devrait pas être plus accessible que celui du champ de mon voisin. Dans un monde où tout est monétisé, tant que nous n'attribuerons pas de valeur économique à la santé des populations, à l'impact sur la biodiversité, aux émissions de gaz à effet de serre, aux ressources naturelles, à la délocalisation du travail, il sera difficile de convaincre pour le développement de l'agriculture locale et biologique. La comptabilité en triple capital, qui évalue la performance environnementale et sociale au même titre que la performance économique d'une entreprise, est un outil qui permet de démontrer la viabilité de notre modèle de production, afin de convaincre les institutions et tous les agriculteurs de l'intérêt de s'y engager, mais aussi rendre de nouveau attractive notre profession. Cependant, pour changer nos systèmes alimentaires, nous ne pouvons pas agir que sur la production agricole. Celle-ci répond à une demande des consommateurs. Or, les habitudes alimentaires actuelles ne sont pas en phase avec les possibilités de production dans notre contexte océanien, ni avec l'équilibre nutritionnel. La promotion des produits frais locaux doit aller de pair avec le développement de processus de transformation utilisant des matières premières locales. En effet, la part de produits transformés dans la consommation alimentaire est importante. Il faut donc développer et soutenir des petites industries de transformation basées sur des produits adaptés à notre contexte pédoclimatique. C'est pourquoi il nous faut aujourd'hui relocaliser notre consommation, revaloriser la qualité des produits qui sont adaptés à nos latitudes et les remettre au centre de nos assiettes. C'est un travail d'éducation qui commence au plus jeune âge, dans les familles, mais aussi à l'école, pour recréer le lien entre le sol, la plante, l'animal et le produit consommé. Cela passe par l'approvisionnement des cantines par les produits locaux, mais aussi par la découverte par les enfants de l'agriculture proche de chez eux. Enfin, je dirais que notre démarche sera un succès si l'ensemble de la société remet le métier d'agriculteur dans son rôle central. C'est simplement le plus beau métier du monde à mes yeux. Merci à tous.
Thank you very much, Frank. The most important and most beautiful job in the world. I think that's a wonderful way to describe producing food. Thank you so much for your insights and for the great work you're doing supporting organic agriculture in the region. So, I would like to thank once again all our very inspirational speakers. I've definitely got a lot to think about out of that, and I'm sure you all will have as well.